Let's have an honest conversation about Americans and American innovation. People love to argue about who built this country, usually while wearing a red hat with white embroidery, made in China, and rage texting on a smartphone designed in California by a guy from Syria's son. When we look at the raw data, the historical narrative is clear. The United States is the greatest group project in human history, specifically because the guys who assigned the project, the British, were fucking useless. Here is the unvarnished, no filter historical truth about who actually built the American machine. The British, the participation trophy of colonization. Let's start with the OG crew, the British colonists. These guys sailed across the Atlantic, looked at a continent full of natural resources and existing residents with inferior weapons, and immediately decided to die of dysentery. They founded Jamestown in a swamp, a fucking swamp. They looked at the malaria-infested bog and said, "Yes, Nigel, this feels like home. Let's wear wool layers and refuse to bathe." The British contribution to early American innovation was buckles on hats, aerodynamically questionable. Naming towns and states, new place we hated in England. Boiling food until it surrendered. Buying dark-skinned humans to do all the hard work for them. Let's be honest. These are not the people you call when you want to invent the future. These are the douchebags you call when you need someone to file a noise complaint against a thunderstorm. Phase 1. Enter the Germans and Irish. Eventually, America realized that if it relied on the original colonists, the national export would be dampness. So they opened the doors. Suddenly, the Germans showed up. The British had wooden carts. The Germans had engineering so precise it made the laws of physics sweat. John Roebling, Prussia, looked at the East River and said, "I will build a bridge here using steel wire. It will not fall." The locals were terrified. The Brooklyn Bridge is still standing. Levi Strauss, Bavaria, realized American miners were tearing their pants and invented denim rivets. He literally engineered the American butt. Meanwhile, the Irish arrived and built the Erie Canal, the railroads, and the entire concept of infrastructure, largely by surviving conditions that would have made a pilgrim implode. Phase 2. The Italians and the Boom. Then came the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The British were still trying to figure out how to tax tea while the Italians arrived and decided to invent modern life. Enrico Fermi, Italy, the architect of the nuclear age. Before Fermi, the most dangerous thing in America was a bear. Antonio Meucci, Italy, developed the telephone prototype before A.G. Bell, a Scot, stole the idea and filed a patent. Amedeo Giannini, Italy, founded the Bank of Italy, which became Bank of America. He invented branch banking so regular people could actually have money. Before this wave, the spice level in America was flour. The Italians brought electricity, radio waves, banking, and food that didn't taste like cardboard sadness. Phase 3. The Einstein Era. Then World War II happened, and Europe's worst dictator accidentally created America's greatest scientific golden age by scaring all the smart people away. Wait, doesn't that sound oddly like what's happening today? Eastern European and Jewish scientists fled to the US and turned the university system into the Avengers of physics. Albert Einstein, Germany, rewrote the laws of reality. Edward Teller, Hungary, and John von Neumann, Hungary, basically invented the computer architecture that made this essay possible and the weapons that keep superpowers polite. While the daughters of the American Revolution, the original housewives of New England, were trading gossip and sipping tea, refugees were in a basement in Chicago figuring out how to harness the power of the sun. Phase 4. Silicon Valley, Ellis Island 2.0. And now we reach the modern era. If you remove immigrants from the tech industry, Silicon Valley becomes a fruit orchard with really high rent. Sergey Brin, USSR, co-founded Google. Jensen Huang, Taiwan, founded NVIDIA. If you like AI, video games, or stock markets that go up, thank him. Elon Musk, South Africa. Love him or hate him, the man created PayPal, is fooling with brain implants, making robots that are actually useful, and strapped a car to a rocket and shot it at Mars. That is not Mayflower energy. That is, I have absolutely no chill energy. Jerry Yang, Taiwan, Yahoo. Well, it used to be a thing. Pierre Omidyar, France, eBay. The verdict? More than half of America's billion-dollar startups were founded by immigrants. And even today, more than half of America's billion-dollar startups are run by immigrants. Microsoft, FedEx, Google, IBM. Coca-Cola's CEO is an actual Brit, and Pepsi is run by a Spaniard. As a matter of fact, there are more foreign CEOs of major American companies right now than at any time in American history, which leads one to question, have Americans become too dumb to do anything important? The reality is that America became a superpower the moment it stopped listening to tea-sipping bubbas in powdered wigs and started listening to the guys with heavy accents and degrees in theoretical mathematics. America is a group project where the British brought the poster board and the ego. The French DuPont brought the explosives. The Germans built the table the project sits on. The Asians and Eastern Europeans did the math, wrote the code, and finalized the presentation. So the next time some lying politician talks about traditional American values and innovation, remind them that the most traditional American value is looking at a complex problem, shrugging, and waiting for some bro named Armando to fly over and fix it. Where are the original invaders? The descendants of the original British colonists are still the largest ancestral group in the United States, but you rarely hear them referred to as a single block anymore. We're talking about the original British settlers, the Puritans clutching their Bibles, the Quakers refusing to take their hats off for anyone, the Scots-Irish who showed up ready to fight literally everything. Where are their descendants? To understand how they are faring, you have to split them into two distinct groups. They may have shared a boat 300 years ago, but today they occupy opposite ends of the American economic and cultural spectrum. They have been passive-aggressively feuding ever since. Let's begin with the crew that landed in places like Massachusetts and Philadelphia. The Puritans and Quakers, basically the original, we're not here to have fun, we're here to be correct crowd. Think surnames like Winthrop, Adams, Cabot, Lodge, Washington, Quincy, Lowell, Emerson, Whitney, and Brewster. These are names that show up on university buildings, historical societies, and those little bronze plaques that tell you which old white guy did something in 1687. These folks built institutions like they were playing civilization on hard mode: churches, schools, governments, anti-slavery movements. If there was a committee, they chaired it. They were obsessed with education, community betterment, and making sure everyone followed the same rules. Fast forward a few centuries, and you'll find their descendants sprinkled across New England, the Mid-Atlantic, the Pacific Northwest, and every zip code where a modest home costs what most people make in a decade. Here's the thing about modern English Americans, the ones who actually identify that way on the census, they're doing fantastically well economically. Highest median incomes, highest educational attainment rates, completely dominant in the professional managerial class. We're talking lawyers, professors, consultants, nonprofit directors, people who say circling back in emails and actually mean it. The Cabots are still talking to the Lowells, and the Lowells are still talking to God, except now they're doing it from their gated lake house patios instead of church pews. Inheritance is a wonderful way to become wealthy. But here's where it gets interesting. There are currently 0 WASPs, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, on the Supreme Court. 0, not 1. The group that once controlled the presidency, Congress, every Ivy League admissions office, and basically wrote the rules of American institutional life has been completely displaced from the power structures they built. Back in the 1950s, WASPs were the establishment, the default setting for American power. Now, they've been quietly elbowed out by people whose ancestors weren't even allowed in their country clubs 60 years ago. They went from running the country to running book clubs and arguing about zoning laws at town meetings. They traded institutional dominance for Whole Foods memberships, Patagonia vests, and became the world's most educated bystanders. Their trust funds are doing fine, but they're no longer in charge, and they seem weirdly okay with it. These are people whose great-great-grandparents built Harvard, and now their kids need perfect SAT scores and a heartbreaking personal essay just to get waitlisted. Now let's talk about the other branch of the family tree, the borderers, Scots-Irish settlers from the lawless British-Scottish border region who brought names like Jackson, Boone, Crockett, Jones, Armstrong, Elliot, Patterson, McBride, McAllister, McCoy, McDonald, and Smith. Notice something? A lot of Macy and Mac prefixes, sure, but also a lot of names that just sound American, like baseline default American. That's not an accident. These were people from a region where clan warfare was a lifestyle, where raiding your neighbor's cattle ranch was basically a Tuesday, and where trusting the government was a good way to end up dead. They showed up to America already pissed off, battle-tested, and allergic to authority. Their hobbies included survival, family feuds, moonshining, and telling anyone in a fancy coat to mind their own damn business. They pushed into Appalachia, the rural South, the Ozarks, the Inland West. Anywhere the land was cheap, the government was far away, and a man could settle disputes without involving law. Here's where it gets fascinating. These descendants largely identify on the census as American ancestry, not British American, not Scots-Irish, just Murican. They've been here so long, many families since the 1720s and 1730s, that they've completely detached from any European identity. Census maps show a massive American ancestry belt stretching across Appalachia, the upland South, and parts of the Midwest. We're talking about people whose family trees go back 8, 9, 10 generations on this continent. To them, asking, "Where are you from originally?" is an insult. Their great-great-great-great-grandparents are buried in cemeteries that predate the Revolutionary War. Economically, they're not so great. DNA is a bitch. Lower median incomes than their northern cousins. Lower educational attainment. Lower life expectancy. The regions they dominate have been hammered by decades of pollution, globalization, automation, the decline of manufacturing, and policy neglect. While the Cabots and Lodges were buying lake houses, building endowments, climbing corporate ladders, and using Oxford commas, the Jacksons were spitting tobacco while watching their factories close. But culturally, they kept the warrior ethos alive. These are the communities that are disproportionately represented in the military and law enforcement, carrying the idea that defending your land is a sacred duty, while their northeastern cousins carry NPR totes and argue about whether it's ethical to eat honey. Politically, they're the backbone of populist conservatism. Historian David Hackett Fisher argues in Albion Seed, and it explains so much it's honestly annoying. America's regional cultures aren't random. They're direct descendants of specific British subcultures that transplanted here in the 1600s and 1700s and never stopped fighting. We didn't escape British political drama. We rebranded it, gave it like 4 American accents, and moved it to a bigger stage, the United States government. The Puritans brought communalism, and that is not communism, 4th grade educated Appalachian Bubba. Education, worship, moral reform, and a deep belief that society should regulate itself into righteousness through good laws and institutions. Fast forward to today, and that's your modern liberalism. Activists, academics, institutionalists, people who genuinely believe the right policy paper can solve anything. They look at a problem and think, what system can we build? What regulation can we pass? How do we get everyone on the same page? It's the Winthrops and Emersons all over again, just with better data visualization. The borderers brought radical individualism, honor culture, a hair-trigger sense of disrespect, and a fuck-around-and-find-out attitude toward anyone who looked like authority. Today, that's your modern conservatism. Gun rights, personal freedom, anti-federalism, and a blood allergy to being told what to do by people who've never changed their own oil. They look at the same problem and think, why is this the government's business? Why can't people just handle their own affairs? Who do these people think they are? It's the Jacksons and Boones all over again, just with social media accounts. Same genetic stock, same island of origin, same teeth and terrible food, completely incompatible worldviews, and both are absolutely convinced they're the reasonable ones having to deal with crazy people. So where did the British settlers go? They're still here, they just had a divorce so messy it created a 400-year culture war that shows no signs of slowing down. Half of them, the Cabots, Lodges, Saltonstalls and their descendants became wealthy, secular, college-educated coastal professionals who quietly lost control of the institutions they built while maintaining elite economic status. They're teaching at universities, running foundations, working in finance and tech, and wondering why everyone's so angry all the time when there are clearly sensible solutions to everything. The other half, the Jacksons, Boones, Caldwells, and their descendants, became fiercely independent, culturally traditionalist heartland Americans who kept the nation's warrior culture alive while getting economically left behind. They're serving in the military, working trades, and wondering why coastal elites think they're stupid just because they don't have master's degrees and prefer trucks to Teslas. Same ancestors, same ships, same questionable hats. Two completely different countries that happen to share a border, a flag, and an increasingly strained relationship. The Washingtons think America is broken and needs to be fixed through education, progress, and reform. The Jacksons think America is broken because of education, progress, and reform, and we should have left well enough alone back in 1865, 1920, 1933, and 1964. They're never getting back together. This isn't a trial separation. This is irreconcilable differences, and both sides have already hired lawyers. The British didn't disappear from America. They just multiplied, diverged, and turned their ancient family feud into our entire political system. Thanks for that, guys. Really appreciate it. So the next time you applaud ICE, think about what you're applauding.